This is a Brooklyn News special report.
And a good day from Brooklyn, Arkansas, inside of Brooklyn News headquarters. I'm Jackson Mitchell, joining you live here on this BN special report as we stand by, because any moment from now, President Joe Biden is expected to deliver a speech, giving his farewell speech, essentially a speech that so many presidents have given. This one expected to be more historic than others, as he's only a one-term president. We want to take you out live to the White House as we stand by for some other news that we are going to cover throughout this next little bit. A live look there at the... I'm sorry, I want to apologize for that. I thought that we may have had a live look at the White House, but we unfortunately do not have that no longer. We are standing by, though, for President Joe Biden to give an Oval Office address and give his farewell speech. There is some news while we're standing by for that speech that we do, in fact, want to cover. And that is that earlier today, that breaking news occurred as Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire deal. We want to go through what all that means, but first, I want to start off with President Joe Biden earlier today talking on this entire thing.
The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza. And the surge of humanitarian assistance in the Gaza.
I apologize. I don't mean to have to stop that early, but we are at 7 o'clock, and we are right here where President Biden will take over our coverage here on BN. We are standing by for that to occur here as we just moments away here. President Biden to address the nation from the Oval Office. Any moment now here we are to hear from the President Biden. I want to apologize here for having to break out of that. We can keep talking for just a second as we await the President to speak. We can keep talking about this ceasefire deal. I'll keep my eye out on it. But essentially, at the end of that clip, and that's really what I wanted you guys to watch, is he was laying out what all this meant here. He was saying what happened in Phase 1. I have an ABC News story here on my laptop that talks about what this means going into Day 1, Day 2, and forward. And forward, it talks about what Phase 1 means, and President Biden, they're saying, I don't know if you guys had gotten that far inside that clip, but it's going to essentially be this 6-week deal, and, it's going to be 3 6-week phases, and in the first 6 weeks, we are going to see this, and I can put it up on your screen. If I go back to that other graphic there, that is Phase 1 right there, and that just gives us a moment as we talk about this Israel and Hamas ceasefire deal. Phase 1, Israel forces withdraw from the east, aid for Gaza, 33 hostages released, part of the 33 hostages released as we stand by for this speech here. I'm sorry, I'm just having to check on that, but that is the list of things that is expected to be talked about here. So we do want to stand by for that. President Biden. Stand by here. A little bit of a broadcast delay as we kind of await the president to begin his remarks here. So a little bit of a broadcast delay. I know he... Okay. President Biden there beginning his remarks. Can we hear? I want to apologize here.
My fellow Americans,
President Biden
I'm
beginning his
speaking
remarks.
to you tonight from the Oval Office. Before I begin, let me speak to important news from earlier today. After 8 months of nonstop negotiation, by my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team, and it will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans. This will be my final address to you from the American people, from the Oval Office, from this desk as president. And I've been thinking a lot about who we are, and maybe more importantly, who we should be. Long ago, in New York Harbor, an iron worker installed beam after beam, day after day. He was joined by steel workers, stonemasons, engineers. They built not just a single structure, but a beacon of freedom. The very idea of America was so big, we felt the entire world needed to see. The Statue of Liberty, a gift from France after our Civil War. Like the very idea of America, it was built not by one person, but by many people, from every background and from around the world. Like America, the Statue of Liberty is not standing still. Her foot literally steps forward atop a broken chain of human bondage. She's on the march, and she literally moves. She's built to sway back and forth to withstand the fury of stormy weather, to stand the test of time because storms are always coming. She sways a few inches, but she never falls into the current below. An engineering marvel. The Statue of Liberty is also an enduring symbol of the soul of our nation. A soul shaped by forces that bring us together and by forces that pull us apart. And yet through good times and tough times, we've withstood it all. A nation of pioneers and explorers, of dreamers and doers, of ancestors native to this land, of ancestors who came by force, a nation of immigrants who came to build a better life, a nation holding the torch of the most powerful idea ever in the history of the world, that all of us are created equal, that all of us deserve to be treated with dignity, justice, and fairness, that democracy must defend and be defined and be imposed, moved in every way possible. Our rights, our freedoms, our dreams. But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power. But whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example, whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society, the presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press, institutions that are rooted, they just not reflect the timeless words, but they echo the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Rooted in the timeless words of the Constitution, we the people. Our system of separation of powers, checks and balances. It may not be perfect, but it's maintained our democracy for nearly 250 years, longer than any other nation in history that's ever tried such a bold experiment. In the past 4 years, our democracy has held strong. And every day I've kept my commitment to be president for all Americans through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. I've had a great partner in Vice President Kamala Harris. It's been the honor of my life to see the resilience of essential workers getting us through a once-in-a-century pandemic. The heroism of service members and first responders keeping us safe. The determination of advocates standing up for our rights and our freedoms instead of losing their jobs to an economic crisis that we inherited. Millions of Americans now have the dignity of work. Millions of entrepreneurs and companies creating new businesses and industries, hiring American workers, using American products. And together, we've launched a new era of American possibilities. One of the greatest modernizations of infrastructure in our entire history, from new roads, bridges, clean water, affordable high-speed internet for every American. We invented the semiconductor, smaller than the tip of my little finger, and now is bringing those chip factories and those jobs back to America where they belong, creating thousands of jobs. Finally, giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for millions of seniors. And finally, doing something to protect our children and our families by passing the most significant gun safety law in 30 years and bringing violent crime to a 50-year low. Meeting our sacred obligation to over 1 million veterans so far who are exposed to toxic materials, and to their families, providing medical care and education benefits and more for their families. You know, it will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration, a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've upheld my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example. I have no doubt that America is in a position to continue to succeed. That's why in my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before, more than a century ago. But the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. They just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that's exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes. So much is at stake. Right now, the existential threat of climate change has never been clearer. Just look across the country, from California to North Carolina. That's why I signed the most significant climate and clean energy law ever in the history of the world, and the rest of the world is trying to model it now. It's working, creating jobs and industries of the future. Now, we've proven we don't have to choose between protecting the environment and growing the economy. We're doing both. The powerful forces want to wield their unchecked influence to eliminate the steps we've taken to tackle the climate crisis, to serve their own interests for power and profit. We must not be bullied into sacrificing the future of our children and our grandchildren. We must keep pushing forward and push faster. There's no time to waste. It's also clear that American leadership in technology is an unparalleled source of innovation that can transform lives. We see the same dangers of the concentration of technology, power, and wealth. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence is the most consequential technology of our time, perhaps of all time. Nothing offers more profound possibilities and risks for our economy and our security, our society, for humanity. Artificial intelligence even has the potential to help us answer my call to end cancer as we know it. But unless safeguards are in place, AI could spawn new threats to our rights, our way of life, to our privacy, how we work, and how we protect our nation. We must make sure AI is safe and trustworthy and good for all humankind. In the age of AI, it's more important than ever that the people must govern. And as the land of liberty, America, not China, must lead the world in the development of AI. You know, in the years ahead, it'll help to be, it's going to be up to the presidency, the Congress, the courts, the free press, and the American people to confront these powerful forces. We must reform the tax code, not by giving the biggest tax cuts to billionaires, but by making them begin to pay their fair share. We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to enact an 18-year time limit, time and term, for the strongest ethics and the strongest ethics reforms for our Supreme Court. We need to ban members of Congress from trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make it clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute, and it shouldn't be. And in a democracy, there's another danger to the concentration of power and wealth. It erodes the sense of unity and common purpose. It causes distrust and division. Participating in our democracy becomes exhausting and even disillusioning. And people don't feel like they have a fair shot. We have to stay engaged in the process. I know it's frustrating. A fair shot is what makes America, America. Everyone's entitled to a fair shot. Not a guarantee, but just a fair shot. An even playing field. Going as far as your hard work and talent can take you. We can never lose that essential truth, remain who we are. I've always believed, and I've told other world leaders, America can be defined by one word: possibilities. Only in America do we believe anything is possible. Like a kid with a stutter from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, sitting behind this desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. That's the magic of America. It's all around us. Upstairs in the residence of the White House, I've walked by a painting of the Statue of Liberty I don't know how many times. In the painting, there's several workers climbing on the outstretched arm of the statue that holds the torch. It reminds me every day I pass it of the story and soul of our nation and the power of the American people. There's a story of a veteran. This is a veteran, the son of an immigrant, whose job was to climb that torch and polish the amber panes so rays of light could reach out as far as possible. He was known as the keeper of the flame. He once said of the Statue of Liberty, quote, speaks a silent universal language, one of hope that anyone who seeks and speaks freedom can understand. Yes, we sway back and forth to withstand the fury of the storm, to stand the test of time. A constant struggle, a short distance between peril and possibility. But what I believe is the America of our dreams is always closer than we think. It's up to us to make our dreams come true. Let me close by stating my gratitude to so many people, to the members of my administration, as well as public service and first responders across the country and around the world. Thank you for stepping up to serve. To our service members and your families, it's been the highest honor of my life to lead you as Commander-in-Chief. And of course to Kamala and our incredible partner, the historic Vice President. She and Doug have become like family, and to me, family's everything. My deepest appreciation to our amazing First Lady who was with me in the Oval today, for our entire family. You're the love of my life and the life of my love. My eternal thanks to you, the American people. After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strength of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you for this great honor.
You have been listening to President Joe Biden there in the Oval Office as we have seen him deliver his farewell speech. I'm Jackson Mitchell. If you're just joining us, that's what you were just listening to in the Oval Office. I'm here in Brooklyn News headquarters inside Brooklyn, Arkansas, I should say. President Biden talking about a number of different things. The one thing that's really going to be key to look out for is the beginning of a speech, going all the way to the end highlighting the threat that he believes that President-elect Donald Trump, who will be inaugurated in just 5 days, poses to America's democracy. He begins the speech, though, by giving this kind of analogy on how the Statue of Liberty stands. He says, it stands with one leg ahead of the other, so when a winter storm gets close to it, it doesn't break. And he says that's how he believes America is. He says all are created equal. He says he touts a number of things, including how he believes he has held democracy strong. He touted his achievements, or what he believes to be achievements, in Medicare, the microchip, internet, crime, education, that goes on. 12 million new jobs as well, something really rare for an administration, especially when we talk about when Biden took over the White House, which was at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's something key. He touts his what he talks about when it comes to NATO, his achievements when it comes to NATO. We can tell you that Trump was not too fond of NATO and kind of put it on the back burner for a while, trying to get rid of it at times. And President Biden brought that back and made others pay their fair share to be a part of the organization. So he talks about the climate bill that he created, and he talks about he even talks about social media, and he takes a hit, as what I have taken and alludes to Meta, I should say, who owns Facebook and Instagram and the newer social media app known as Threads. He says, quote, social media giving up on fact checking, which I believe he's talking about Meta, which its owner, CEO, I should say, Mark Zuckerberg, took away is going to lay back fact checking, I should say, and do it similar to how the former platform named Twitter, or X, I should say now, is doing it. And essentially, what you comment, it will develop kind of this what I believe they're calling community notes, and it basically says people in the comments are saying this, that it's false, and that this is true, instead of what Meta has done with their fact checking policy. Earlier, he warns about AI. He says their safeguards are needed. He says this is when he talks about going forward. This is the part of the speech where he talks about going forward. He says he warns about AI. He says safeguards are needed. He says that the quote must reform tax codes. He says can't give billionaire tax cuts. He needs to that President-elect Donald Trump should make the billionaires pay their fair share. He says there needs to be an 18-year term, referring to the Supreme Court, taking another hit at the Supreme Court by saying that just because you're president doesn't mean you are immune to things that you do as president. He says he never believed that a kid with a stutter would be sitting behind the Roosevelt desk there. After 50 years in politics, Biden kind of putting that to the side and moving on forward in essentially what I would say retirement as President Biden goes forward here. He's saying a number of different things, key things to remember, and a big part of the speech that I'm going to take note of is how he said he wishes the next administration the best, but he oftentimes appeared to take hits at the president-elect, saying that, democracy needs to be watched out for, essentially saying that it's key to see that not naming names really, but saying that what the next administration does with the power that it is given needs to be watched out for. So that's going to be something to take away from this speech tonight, as well as a number of other things. President Biden delivering his farewell speech just hours after an Israel and Hamas ceasefire was agreed to. And we talked about that a little before we came on, where President Biden began to speak. And I want to give a quick brief about that before we get back into it. Before we get back into it, talking and wrap up our coverage here. So Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire. That's what I want right there. And it's essentially going to be done in 3 phases of 3 6-week phases. And phase 1, this is just a few things that it includes. And this is what President Biden, and I should say his team, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Qatari, and Egypt, and Israel and Hamas all have come together kind of to talk about and agree with here. And essentially what that agreement says is that Israel forces must withdraw from the east. It allows for aid for Gaza, 33 hostages released. That's within the 3 phases. Essentially, the first hostages to be released are going to be women, children, and the elderly. So men are going to have to stay back for just a little longer until at least the second or third phase of this entire 6-week deal on the ceasefire deal. And it says Palestinians can return to their neighborhoods. That's just a few things included in that deal, but I did want to talk about that a little before we left you here, because I know we were talking about it before President Biden had begun his Oval Office address. Something else we want to talk about here is, if you'll just stand by with me, is what Donald Trump has said on his social media page, on Truth Social. He says, I'm going to quote from his page here, he says, talking about the ceasefire, quote, "This epic ceasefire agreement could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as a signal to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans, of and our allies, I should say. I'm thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. With this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe Haven, something just key to talk about here. So again, we will continue our coverage at brooklynnews.wordpress.com and on all of our social media pages that have been scrolling at the bottom of the screen. That is going to do it for me here in Brooklyn News headquarters inside of Brooklyn, Arkansas. I'm Jackson Mitchell. This concludes an BN special report.